Hi, we are going to talk about how to figure out the changes that transformations make to domain and range of an arbitrary function. So when we apply transformations to the graph of some function, how is it going to affect the domain and the range of the original function? So we're going to take a look at this example first. We have some function f of x. We know its domain is going to be from negative infinity to infinity, all real numbers, and the range is going to be from negative 5 to infinity. And we need to find the domain of each of these functions whose equation is going to be based on that. So what happens with this one? This graph, f of x plus 3, is going to be shifted 3 units up. This is going to impact the y coordinates. The domain is going to stay the same because since the domain is going to be all real numbers, it's never going to change. There's no restriction here, so it's going to stay the same. What's going to happen to range? The range starts at negative 5 and goes up to infinity. In our case, we're going to shift that graph 3 units up, so that means that negative 5 is going to be moved 3 units up, and the range here is going to be from negative 2 to infinity. What happens when you have f of x minus 3? This is a horizontal shift 3 units to the right. It is affecting the axis. But the x, the domain, which is what x is already all real numbers, so shifting it left or right is not going to impact it at all. Because we have no vertical change, then the range is going to be the same as the original function. 2 times f of x. So what happens with that one? This is going to cause the vertical stretch by a factor of 2, which means it's not going to impact the domain in any way, and even if it did, our domain was all real numbers anyway. What about the range? Well, if you think about this, so you're starting at negative 5, right? And you're going to double all the y coordinates. That means the lowest point is going to be doubled as well. Our lowest point is negative 5. You double that, it is going to be negative 10. And it's going to go to infinity, because infinity, even if you double infinity, it's still infinity. Okay, I accidentally copied that again, so please excuse that. What about example 5? We have negative f of x. This is going to switch the graph across the x-axis. And when you switch the graph across the x-axis, well, the domain is going to stay the same. But what's going to happen with range? The range is going to be flipped over, which means the highest value that we have, which is the infinity, is going to flip and become negative infinity. And the lowest value that we had, which was negative 5, is going to flip and become positive 5. And because the lowest value is negative infinity and the highest is 5, they're going to switch the order. So this is how it works with this function. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next example. We have this function whose domain is from negative 2 to infinity, and the range is from 0 to 10. And we want to find domain and range of the functions based on that. I hope you're going to start understanding this a little bit better now. This is a vertical shift 4 units down. Because it's impacting the y coordinates, then axes are going to stay the same, which means your domain is going to stay the same. What is going to happen with the range? The range is going to shift 4 units down. That means that 0 is going to shift 4 units down and it's going to become negative 4. And 10 is going to shift 4 units down and it's going to become 6. So our range is going to be from negative 4 to 6. What's happening here? There are 2 things happening and you have to be careful. It is going to be shifted 5 units to the left and 1 unit up. We are actually going to impact both x and y. So as far as x, our domain is going to shift 5 units to the left. So instead of starting at negative 2, it is going to start 5 units earlier. It's going to start at negative 7. Infinity cannot be affected. What about the range? Well, the range is going to be shifted 1 unit up, so both endpoints of this closed interval are going to change by 1, so it's going to go from 1 to 11. 1/2 g of x. So we are cutting, the graph is going to have a vertical shrink by a factor of 1/2. And when you do that, first of all, the domain here is not going to be impacted because this is the x coordinates. The range will be. The range goes from 0 to 10, so we're going to have to cut each of these values in half. When you cut 0 in half, you're still going to have 0. When you cut 10 in half, you are going to get 5. So our range is going to shrink from 0 to 10, and it's going to change to 0 to 5. What is that? That here is going to be a reflection about the y-axis. And when you reflect about the y-axis, the domain is going to be impacted. So our domain is going to flip, and we're going to go from negative infinity to positive 2, because both ends are going to switch. Negative 2 will become positive 2, and positive infinity will become negative infinity. So our domain is going to be from negative infinity to 2. The range here, since we're only making horizontal change, is going to remain the same. Okay. This one is going to be a a horizontal shrink by a factor of 2. So when you shrink this horizontally by a factor of 2, your x coordinates are going to shrink. You basically cut them in half. That means the domain is going to be impacted. So negative 2 here, when you divide it by 2, it's going to become negative 1. The infinity, even though you're shrinking that, is still going to remain infinity. And the range here is not going to be impacted. There is no vertical change. Okay. And our last function here. So we have a function h of x whose domain is from negative 4 to 18. And the range is from negative infinity to 10. And we're going to apply all these transformations and see how it's going to impact each one of those. This is a vertical shift 4 units down. The domain is not going to be affected by vertical change. The range will be. So what's happening with the range? Well, we're shifting everything down 4 units. The negative infinity is not going to be impacted. 10 will be impacted. You subtract 4 from it, it's going to go all the way to 6. Alright, this is where it gets challenging, because we have 3 things here. We're shifting the graph 6 units to the left. We're flipping that about the x-axis, and then we're shifting it down 5 units. The only thing that is going to impact the domain here is the horizontal shift. 6 units. We can take care of that right away. So we take our domain, change every value by 6 units by subtracting 6 from it. So it's going to be from negative 10 to 12. What is going to happen to range? Well, let's think about this. First of all, we're going to take this range, and when you flip, it's going to change this from negative 10 to positive infinity. And then you're going to shift it 5 units down. So you take this, infinity is not going to move, it's still infinity, but when you shift negative 10, 5 units down, is going to become negative 15. Okay, what about negative h of x? Well, we kind of sort of look at that. This is not going to, this is a reflection about the x-axis. It's not going to impact the domain, which is going to remain the same. It is going to impact range by switching the endpoints and changing their signs. So it's going to be from negative 10 to positive infinity. This here is going to do 2 things. We're going to reflect that about the y, well, we're going to shrink that, I'm sorry, this is going to double the, it's going to stretch horizontally by a factor of 2. Horizontal stretch, factor of 2. And then you're going to flip about the y-axis. So it's all horizontal changes. They do not impact the domain. So the domain is going to be, no, I'm sorry, the domain is what's getting impacted. The range is not going to be impacted. So the range is going to stay the same here. It's going to go from -infinity to 10. But the domain, so we do a horizontal stretch by a factor of 2. So when you stretch it, it's going to go still from -infinity, but it's going to go up to 20. Right? And then you're going to flip about the y-axis, so you change the sign and flip the numbers. It's going to go from -20 to +infinity. The last thing we have here is this has a horizontal stretch. No, it's a horizontal shrink, I apologize. By a factor of 2. And then we're gonna have we're gonna quadruple our x, so vertical stretch with a factor of 4, and we're gonna have a flip about the x-axis. So the first transformation is going to impact the domain. That means our domain is going to be cut in half. So if our domain was from -4 to infinity, it's going to become from -2 to 9. And as far as the second part of that, we have a vertical stretch by a factor of 4. So the stretch here is going to be from -infinity to 40. And then you're going to flip about the y-axis, which means you are going to flip the coordinates and change the signs. It's going to go from -40 to +infinity. And that's the whole breakdown of this.